Good morning. Still morning, I guess, 11:30. So welcome to our session. You want to advance one there, man?
Yeah.
There you go. So we're doing hands-on Surface Modern Management. My name is Sean McLaren. I am part of our modern desktop team, which essentially means that I cover anything that goes down on a Windows client, including the management for the Windows client, so Intune and SCCM, and also Windows security. So I work with our customers every day. I'm based out of Dallas, but I spend most of my time with customers helping them get their environments configured and running and working through modernization.
My name is Yoav Barzilai. I'm a consultant with MCS, and thank you all for coming to the 45-minute Surface giveaway. I know. So what Sean and I would like to take you through today is the life cycle of a modern managed Microsoft 365 powered Surface. That would include AutoPilot, Intune, Windows Update, and we'd like you to experience what both users and IT staff would experience during that life cycle. The journey begins, of course, with AutoPilot. At Surface, we have the privilege of working together with the AutoPilot team in the same campus. And so AutoPilot is engineered and tested first on Surface by Microsoft. Now, although the Microsoft factory has all Surface devices enabled and ready for AutoPilot, only the devices that are shipped to you by your partner will be able to trigger AutoPilot for your organization and for your organization only. And we'll cover this a little more down the line today. Now, with AutoPilot, your users only need the corporate credentials. There's no local admin requirements, there's no Microsoft account requirements, and there's no local local user requirements. And of course, what you end up with is a Microsoft 365 powered Surface, which would provide the best experience for both your users and your IT staff. What do we actually need to get started with this? Windows 10 Professional, Enterprise, or Education editions with RS2 or later. These devices, again, must be registered to your organization by your Microsoft partner. AutoPilot doesn't mean you can just walk on to a store, buy a device, and expect it to work with AutoPilot. Your Microsoft partner will register your device with your organization, and by the time you power up the machine, it can be used by your organization. Now, you can self-register these devices as well if you want, but we have a supporting partner system that will help you onboard these devices to your organization. We would require Azure AD Premium 1 or 2 in order to provide our users with a better sign-in experience. So we ask you that you configure the branding for Azure AD. And of course, if you want to have these devices joined to Azure AD, your users must be allowed to join devices to Azure AD. Last but not least, almost last but not least, one before last, and a very, very important and not so simple. AutoPilot is a service provided by Microsoft 365. You must have internet connectivity for that. No internet connectivity, no AutoPilot. It's as simple as that. If you're using Wi-Fi, we support captive portals, so you can sign into the captive portal if required. Proxies would normally be an issue. If you don't whitelist your proxy and if there's authentication required along the side there, you might experience issues. So work with the Microsoft 365 best practice and either whitelist or bypass the proxy for that. And of course, we recommend using, or we require using Microsoft Intune or other MDM solutions so you can have software configuration and application pushed to your devices. Now, let's walk through the out-of-box experience on an AutoPilot-enabled Surface. If any of you has installed a Windows 10 device lately, you know it could be a time-consuming task. We need to configure keyboard, region, end user license agreement, privacy settings. You need to go to your local account or Microsoft account. Otherwise, you have to then join it to your work or school account. Cortana, we want to save you all this time. And in fact, what we've done as part of the preparation for this session is we timed how long it would take a normal account or a regular installation of Surface on Windows 10 and how long would it take Surface with AutoPilot. We noticed we can reduce the number of screens that the users are hitting by 75%. 75% is basically a quarter of the time. So if it took us 20 seconds to get a fully functional Surface device by just configuring it, installing it, with AutoPilot, it takes us 5 minutes.
20 minutes.
Sorry, 20 minutes initially, right?
So 20 seconds would be fast.
Yeah, 20 seconds is a little too fast. We're working on that, though. Yes. So 20 minutes for a regular installation and only 5 minutes on Surface with AutoPilot. So what do our users actually see when they're configuring an AutoPilot-enabled Surface? The first 4 screens are identical for all installations. They'll see the region and the language, of course, and the keyboard, and the second keyboard. If you want a second keyboard, you can configure it there. If your Surface is connected physically to a Surface dock or to a Surface connector, the network screen would just be missed from the configuration. You won't have to go through it. If you're using an LTE, Surface Advanced, or if you're using Wi-Fi, you will be prompted to choose a network. What happens then in the background is that Surface communicates with Office 365 and Microsoft 365 DDS, checking first if it's enabled for AutoPilot and acquiring licenses. So if it is AutoPilot, great, we'll walk through it. If not, we'll continue going through the regular configuration process of Windows 10 on a Surface. What happens next, whether you're AutoPilot or not, is you're getting a 0-day patch. So we confirm that no device is vulnerable when you first log on into it. The end user license agreement is something that you can choose to skip when you're using AutoPilot. So your users won't have to accept the end user license agreement. You've accepted it for them. If you're not using AutoPilot, the next thing you'll see is this ambiguation asking you if you want to sign in with a local account, a Microsoft account, a work or school account. So this far, we've passed through these screens, and the last screen that users are actually compelled to use is providing their Office 365 credentials. So an identity and a password or an MFA. Cortana is always skipped for AutoPilot. And then we have the privacy setting, which you can choose whether you want your users to set them or not, or you want to set them for them. And OEM pages for other manufacturers. So basically, if you're using AutoPilot on Surface devices, all you get is 5 to 6 screens, and your computer is ready to go.
So this is just for a normal Windows 10 update?
If you can use the microphone, please. Thank you.
So this is just for a normal Windows 10 update?
Windows 10 installation. So if you get a device...
Installation, okay.
Yes, installation. AutoPilot is for out-of-the-box experience. Okay? And now Sean will take us through a very interesting demo. And I'll switch you over to number 6. There you go.
Thank you. All right, so what we're going to do is switch gears a little bit. We'll actually go into the Intune UI and walk through the configurations and settings that it takes to do a device. We're also going to fire off a device provision here at the same time. So hopefully you'll get out of this is kind of all the steps that it takes to do this, how much work goes into it, and what you can configure on a device and how you would do that. So I'm on my landing page right now in the Azure Device Management Portal. Is that Cortana talking? I've created a little custom dashboard here. So as doing device management inside of Intune, I'd recommend you create your own dashboard and put on there what's important to you. I've done things like my Azure AD Connect Health, my Windows servicing status, my enrolled devices, users groups, things that I get to quickly. And then I've used some markup elements to actually create links that take me to things that are important to me. Most of those will walk through the process. But so drilling in a little bit, we talked about some of the requirements. One of the requirements to set up AutoPilot is Azure AD branding. So that kind of goes without saying, I have to have Azure AD Connect running. So AD Connect is what syncs my on-prem AD users to Azure AD. Those are the identities that we will use for this. So that's kind of a prerequisite, and then putting the branding into Azure AD. This is required for AutoPilot because when we get to that network connection stage and ask the person to log in with their corporate credentials, we're going to pull your branding down into that screen so that they get a very personalized experience as they're going through UBI. So the time-consuming process there for you will be creating the right image sizes and getting them small enough that everything is happy. Once you do that, the other key to making this work is I pulled up Yoav's user information here in the new Microsoft 365 Admin Center. This is where I like to do my license assignments, but assigning him a license for M365, which gives him Windows 10 Enterprise or Enterprise Mobility and Security Suite, as well as Office 365 licensing. That allows me to do things like when he's provisioning his machine, I can uplift him to Windows Enterprise automatically from the Pro OEM image that ships on Surface. I can also install Office 365 Pro Plus client, and I can secure our corporate data and protect our identities with the Enterprise Mobility and Security Suite. That also gives me my Azure Active Directory licensing and the ability to join that device. So those are required as well. It does also take away the need for KMS servers and things like that. So the other thing that I can enable optionally, this is the Azure AD MFA screen, but you basically can turn on MFA for your users. I highly recommend you force MFA on them. And what this will do is it'll actually bring that MFA experience into UBI as well. So as he's going through the process, he will get challenged for multi-factor authentication. Once we get the basics set up there, we move right into actually enrolling the devices. So as mentioned, we do have a partner portal. Whoops. So when you buy a Surface device from your reseller can actually take the device information and upload that directly into the Partner Center portal on your behalf. So by creating a relationship with you, they're able to register devices to your tenant. They can then do things like put your PO number, order number, et cetera, on those devices, and we can use that to actually assign AutoPilot profiles dynamically and kind of fully automate the bulk provisioning assignments that way. So a partner would upload those. If you want to do it yourself, there's a PowerShell script you can run. This is great for proof of concepts or getting started with a pilot. It also works for existing devices that you have in your organization. You can run that PowerShell script manually, or you can push it out with a tool if you have existing machines. This is for AutoPilot, so if you do this on existing machines, that would be a workflow where you're actually going to reset that machine and AutoPilot it. Or in a modern management transition, it would be a machine that you want to prepare for AutoPilot in case something goes wrong with it, and you want to be able to bring it back to life using an AutoPilot deployment. But essentially, this is what this is, so I don't expect you to understand this file much. It's got a 4K hash in here. I do have my device serial number. And then I also have this order ID up top, which allows me to do the dynamic association. So I can use that. But essentially, this is the information that you're uploading to register that device to your tenant. So things that I can configure within enrollment, when I look at actual devices listed to me, I get a nice list here of the devices that I have in my organization. As you can see, I have the serial numbers, whether or not they're assigned an AutoPilot profile. And this deployment group is where that PO number, order ID, et cetera, will be assigned and allow me to use that to dynamically assign. So in my AutoPilot profiles, when I look at what I'm configuring here, when you think about AutoPilot and UBI, what I'm trying to do is I'm configuring that first 2% of the work when the user's actually coming into the machine. This isn't all the policies that go down on the machine at this point. This is turning off all those screens that we didn't want. And it's basically preparing the machine. Password, which most people know. One of the things you've probably heard a lot about this week, and you'll continue to hear more about it now, is our goal is to actually bring people into UBI, use multi-factor authentication, and provision that Windows machine using Windows Hello for Business without ever putting a password on it. So we're on the mission to get rid of passwords. But this is where I actually turn off the licensing agreement, my privacy settings, and I drop my mouse. And I also set the account type here to be a standard user. So AutoPilot is the only way to provision a brand new machine where the first person that logs into Windows is not an administrator on that machine. So this way we'll bring them into the box as a standard user. Any global admin from your Azure Active Directory tenant can then log into that machine as an admin. It's very similar to the paradigm you have with an on-prem AD and a domain admin. I can also use Intune to assign additional administrators to that machine if I wish to. In preview right now and working on the insider builds for this fall, we do have the ability to also name the machine at this point. That's the bottom setting I have there. We also have the ability to turn off the ability to change account or switch out of that UBI Pro flow. So the flow is completely locked to you at that point. Both of those are in preview, and they do work today with a Windows Insider build. So before I do this, you want to pull up in the store?
Sure. Too many mice here.
So this is our last prerequisite for things we have to set up, and then we'll actually go configure a device.
So in order to either import devices from the store or to push apps to your devices, we require that you have the Microsoft Store for Business Sync enabled. That's already done here. When you go to the store, you'll have to choose a management tool with which you will deploy the apps. So that would be Microsoft Intune. It's there by default. You just need to activate it. And once you've done that, you have the ability to actually build. Sure, sign me off in the middle of the demo. And once we have that, we have the option to actually build collections. And these collections can then be pushed in batches to users to their machines.
So the other thing you can do here is you can invite developers within your organization or third parties to publish applications into your private store. So as a developer who's invited to publish, that means I get to build my code, publish my app into your store. That goes through an approval process. Once you approve that application for deployment, that application would be ready to deploy through your private store. It can also then be assigned in Intune. So switching back, what that gives me on my machine, this is actually my personal machine. So when I look at the store, I have a tab in here for Microsoft. So that isn't a Microsoft consumer store. That's actually our internal store, but it shows up as a tab in the company portal. So the apps inside of there are actually applications that were curated by your organization. So that's the private shell and how that's exposed to the end users. So applications deployed that way can either be pushed to the device or they can be self-service, brought down as the user requests those. So those are the other prerequisites. Once you have that set up, you're now ready to configure and deploy the device and put apps on it. So we'll move back into device configuration. So device configuration allows me to create profiles that will go down onto that device. I have several different types of profiles that I can create. So when I go to create a new profile, I need to give it a name. And then I choose a platform. In this case, we will choose Windows 10. And then I can choose different types of platforms. So we even have Windows Team in here for provisioning a Surface Hub, but we can do device restrictions, endpoint protection policies, information. We can do kiosks. This is in preview today. This is also something coming with the fall build. So that is a complete zero touch. So when Yoav showed the flow at the beginning and you had the machine that was plugged in and went through the language and privacy, things like that on a kiosk deployment, if I actually specify the language in the AutoPilot profile and plug that thing into a network cable, we will skip everything. So as soon as you power that device on, it is true zero touch. It will wake up, contact the cloud, grab its configuration, and provision itself from there, completely zero touch. That is in preview today, works with the Insider preview as well. Oh, I'm going to pull open an existing policy. So some of the things that I can configure when you think of device restrictions and managing Windows clients from the cloud, as we all watch the blades load. So I have various configuration groupings, if you will, that we can configure. Those are down the center of my screen. So I've got some general settings I can configure for different device types. Some of the options apply to different devices depending on what the capabilities of the device are. But here's where I can actually control things like those privacy settings, being able to set a user's wallpaper background, being able to set their start menu, different things like that, configure the Edge browser. et cetera. So this is where I would come to set up everything that I want to configure on those devices, set different policies around this stuff, whether OneDrive files can sync, for example. There's lots of granularity in these policies, but the one thing you'll notice from the Intune side versus doing this in GPOs, things like that, we tried to keep it fairly simple. So if I set a box to enable something, I'm going to get some default options that go along with that. I can accept those defaults, or I can go granular and control different things. But the idea is to make it as simple as possible to provision these devices. Outside of restrictions, when I look at endpoint protection settings that I have available to me through Intune, this is where I get to configure all of the Windows security settings that you would expect. So I have Windows Defender Application Guard settings. I can configure the firewall. I can configure Smart Screen. I can configure BitLocker disk encryption. I can configure Exploit Guard, Application Control, etc. So what happens on a machine that comes in via AutoPilot is I take a Pro OEM image off the shelf, I dynamically provision that, and I let the user hit the desktop. It's a balancing act of how fast you let the user hit the desktop versus what you do to the machine before you let them there from a productivity standpoint. The faster we can get them in and productive, the better, but we also want the machine in a state that IT approves of. So I set these policies up in advance, and when the device is provisioned, these policies get applied to the device, then user policies get applied, and then the user is allowed to hit the desktop at that point. So each one of these, you'll notice as we drill into them, for example, I can even control what the user experience is going to be in the Windows Defender Security Center, for example. So I can get very granular here on how I want to configure this device and the policies that I want to push down to my users. So one of the things that happens during a dynamic provision, if you think of modern management and provisioning, Windows 10 has a health attestation to it, which basically allows you to check the compliance of that device against your policies and decide whether or not that device is healthy. And there's a lot of things that can play into that. But the combination of using the health attestation off the device, setting those policies like I talked about, and then using things like conditional access. So this is actually the conditional access settings within Intune, where I can do things like based on your location. So when you're at the corporate office and sitting on my network, I'm not going to prompt you for MFA, but I'm going to prompt you for MFA when you leave the building. Things like I am not going to let you connect to my VPN until all of our policies are in place, right? So this is part of the balancing act of provisioning an end user machine and using conditional access potentially to hold that machine off of certain resources until things happen, which will allow me to let the user hit the desktop a little bit faster and let some of the configuration finish in the background after they've done that. If I have my data secured in OneDrive for Business, Office 365, then I have an opportunity to let them start being productive. I can still protect their identity and my data, and I can let them in deeper once I am happy with the other configurations or applications that had to go down on that device. So an example of that would be if you have applications that you have to have installed before they're allowed to do certain things, I do not have to hold them until that application is downloaded and installed on that device. I could let them hit the desktop, let that application come down in the background, and use conditional access policies to hold them off. So this is how we combine the power of the health attestation, conditional access, and the policies we have to balance that user experience as we come in. So coming back to applications, this is where I get to deploy the applications that I have in my environment. Now, I have synced Intune to the store for business here. So I'm seeing both applications from the store for business as well as other Win32 applications that I have uploaded. So you can directly upload your MSIs or line of business applications here and assign those as well. When I look at how an application is actually configured, there's some basic properties that go with the application. Expand them out. So some of these are coming from the store themselves, so I don't have to populate any of that. It actually pulls in the store information nicely. And then I assign those applications to various groups within the organization. Now when I add an assignment, I get to choose my assignment type. So in the assignment types that I have available to me, I can say this is available for all enrolled devices, which means it's going to show up in the store and they can pull it down on demand whenever they want it. So they'll see that in the category that I gave them. Maybe it's a productivity app in that category, or a tool, or utility. Whatever kind of user-defined categories I've given them, that's where the user's going to go to get it. Or I can require that application. If I require that application, it means we're actually going to push it onto that device. So as soon as that device provisions, that application will start downloading onto that device and be installed. If the user is an administrator on their machine and they happen to uninstall it, the next time that machine checks in, we're going to push it back down onto that device again. The other thing I can do is an uninstall task. So uninstall tasks are very useful for cleaning up a machine. So to be really transparent, in the modern provisioning world, if you guys caught it, you might wonder why I have Candy Crush in my enterprise apps list. Simple. So when I do an autopilot provision of an enterprise PC, I actually use an uninstall task here to get it out. That is the easiest and cleanest way to get those applications off the machine. I don't have to run any fancy scripts. I can just do an uninstall. Being assigned to my user base, that means they land on a nice clean machine. So it's not always a bad thing to pull Candy Crush into your private store. I don't advertise that to my users, but I do rip it out. So a little trick for you there. The other thing that's important when we look at applications, so we've done a lot of work with Office, for example. So when I look at deploying Office through Microsoft Intune, I actually have the ability to configure the application suite for Office via checkboxes. So when I want to deploy Office onto my clients, I basically check a box for the different applications they want. I can create multiple profiles, so some people may get all of it, some people may only get Word and PowerPoint or whatever. But this is how I would control what they're getting. And then equally as important to putting it on the device, I actually get to provision how this is going to be serviced, whether it's the 32-bit version of Office, the 64-bit version of Office, but we've tried to make it very, very simple. So the Intune team has worked with the Windows, or with the Office team here to make this as simple as possible. One thing on the Surface devices, we do ship our Surface devices with the Office trial on there already, so actually a user can immediately pull a device up and sign in. But we can also uninstall the consumer MSI and push the Enterprise Pro Plus onto that device right here as well, just by checking a box.
Just to add to that, if you're not using this option, you're probably using the Office customization tool with various XML options and deployment options. This would be the easier, cleaner way to do it.
It's a very simple way to get Office. And on a good, strong Wi-Fi connection, one of the questions I get asked a lot. So on autopilot deployment on a strong Wi-Fi connection, I can usually get into the desktop in about 5 to 6 minutes. I have Office and am fully productive with Office 365 Teams and a handful of business applications in about 15 minutes. So it's a pretty good user experience. So the last thing I'll point out in the apps list here, importantly, is I'm pushing the Configuration Manager client onto my machines from here as well. So using Intune, I'm bringing machines into the organization. I'm pushing the ConfigMan client onto them, so effectively my machines are co-managed. So for those who are not familiar with co-management, you want to pull that slide up real quick?
And we need the...
So while he changes the slide over. So co-management is the ability to have SCCM and Intune acting on the same machine at the same time, and they are fully aware of each other. This is a leg up for Intune in the PC management space. Co-management only works with Intune and SCCM. But it allows us to handle those more complex scenarios. It allows me to reuse my legacy task sequences for installing line of business applications or things that I have. If you do have third-party products that create servicing issues for you, where you have to do something to that product to remove it and reinstall it, et cetera, during feature updates, we'd like to see that modernized. In the meantime, you can use co-management to do things like that and actually still run a task sequence. Co-management does work with an Azure AD only joined machine. It also works with a hybrid joined machine. So one of the things also announced yesterday was the ability to do a hybrid join. So I can have a machine that's joined to Azure AD and AD during the autopilot process. Co-management will work in any of those scenarios. The idea when you think of modern management is I have a left to right. On the left-hand side, I have traditional. On the right-hand side, I have fully cloud-based and modern. And as I slide machines across that paradigm, I want to try to get as far out as I can. So if you can bring a device in, Azure AD join it, manage it with Intune, install the SCCM client for those last mile things that you can't do any other way, but not actually domain join that machine, you've taken a slightly higher posture by reducing your attack surface by not having that thing on your domain. You've given the user the great experience of not having that GPO set taking effect as they log on, so their log on is incredibly fast. And so it's a great user experience. I'd recommend going that way first and then doing the AD join if you have to. Again, utilizing legacy task sequences and app installs, etc. When you modernize over time, there's a tool called MMAT. MMAT is good for mapping your GPOs existing today to CSPs, which is the cloud equivalent of a GPO or a cloud policy. So that MMAT tool can be run on an existing Windows 7 machine or an existing Windows 10 machine. It'll give you a list of this policy goes to that CSP, and then the delta of things that don't have a map, which you can figure out whether you still need them or they apply, or how you want to handle that specific scenario. So we'll go back to my machine. So during app deployment, again, I'm putting the config-man client down. The script that is actually in this policy is something that I got out of config-man itself when I set up co-management within there, and I actually downloaded the script. You put it into the Intune portal and hit go, so it's very simple to set up. So once we get a device out in the world and we want to talk about servicing that device, really important is the ability to support the deployment rings directly within Intune, so we've built all that functionality in. We actually do support previews as well. So I do recommend as part of your servicing process, you're actually bringing the preview bits and having a limited set of users evaluate those, decide what features and functionality you want to take advantage of next, get your early look at application compatibility and things like that. But when I configure these rings directly within Intune, I get all the granularity that you would expect as far as what branch of code that I'll be taking, restart Windows for my machine, whether or not I'm going to allow drivers and things like that to update on that machine as well. This all leverages Windows Update for Business, so equally important when you configure this is also to configure delivery optimization. Delivery optimization is peer-to-peer caching built into Windows 10 that allows me to say if that machine already has the updates that I want, I will pull them off of that machine rather than going to the web to get them. That works off of any boundary that you create. That can be an AD site, a subnet, etc. But respecting that boundary, we will look for bits on the peers. It also is hybrid. So that means if I find half of it on that machine and I need to go to the web for the other half, I will pull both simultaneously. So with delivery optimization, pulling things in this way is great. When you think about drivers and things like that, one of the things that Surface does, we do have all of our drivers, firmware, BIOS, etc., on Windows Update for Business, which means that they come naturally during the servicing process. A modern device like a Surface, going from 1709 to 1803, for example, our mean time for updates was about 10 minutes. So the user downtime, we want to get that window as small as we possibly can, and being able to take all of this stuff from Windows Update very quickly and only suffer through a 10-minute reboot cycle is a pretty decent user experience. And we're working very hard to make that less as we go forward. Some of the devices we have that are incredibly fast, actually, believe it or not, the Surface Go, with its incredibly fast hard drive is even faster than that. But the idea is to create that good user experience and be able to keep myself current and keep all my devices secure. So that's servicing. The last piece of the puzzle is what do I do when I have a device that went off into the weeds or needs to be reset for some reason, or I want to retask a device for some other purpose, or I actually want to retire the device. So all that functionality is actually built into Intune as well. So here you can see where I have the ability to wipe a device, I have the ability to restart it, I do have the ability to retire it. In preview right now is what we call an AutoPilot reset. So what we can do during a reset is retain the management on that device and basically just refresh Windows. We know it's still managed, so it comes right back in as a managed device and is still brought to life. So that kind of takes us through the full life cycle. Do you want to actually fire that off?
Yep.
Okay, so we're going to do a live provision, show you guys what this experience actually is, so the policies that we've created.
Okay, so we have, I'm sweating here, okay? This is we haven't done this live like this before. So we have a Surface Pro here on Ubi, and you're going to see exactly what's happening. We had a bet if this is going to work or not.
It'll work. So the scenario is, this is a direct ship device. I ordered a brand new Surface. It was registered to my organization, creating that affinity between this and our Azure Active Directory. So we direct ship it to our end user, who may or may not be technical, and they get to go through the out-of-the-box experience. What you can't hear at the moment is Cortana is actually talking to you. So if you think about direct shipping this device to an end user who is not technical, they can actually use voice or touch. There she is.
Yeah, and then she heard you. She thinks it's okay. So we are in the United States. So is this your keyboard laid out? Yes. Thank you. And no. Keyboard layout. Yes. Do we want to add another keyboard? Anyone here fancies a fancy keyboard? No.
So you guys can't see it, but he's actually using touch on that screen. So the other beautiful thing about AutoPilot is that I am leveraging the Pro OEM image that came on this device, which means all of my drivers are in there and everything just works. So he can use touch and voice through the Ubi experience. When he gets to the end of this and my policy forces him to set up Windows Hello for Business, I can turn the camera on and look at his face, and it all just works because the drivers are there.
Okay, so we are at the corporate sign-in page. Okay, no question, home or office. We skipped the network because we're connected. So the only thing I need to do now is enter my credentials, and miraculously, everything's going to work.
So again, the idea was we don't ask a user to answer any questions that they don't know the answer to. With Windows S on 1803, we are able to bring a user into Windows without ever asking for that password. We can use multi-factors to do that. This fall, we'll be able to do that on any Windows machine. So right now, his device is checking with that service, or it has already checked with the service, so it is registering the device in Azure Active Directory. It's then pulling it under Intune. It's preparing the device with the device-based policies. Then it will go into his user-based policies.
Yeah, we just now see the flow.
So as he enters Windows, he's now getting a user account created on that machine where he will be a standard user, not an administrator. Do you have a question? Can you use a mic just because the recording won't catch your voice otherwise?
So did you mention that sign-in experience would support the new passwordless login functionality?
I will in the fall.
In the fall?
Yes,
Okay.
that's not in 1803.
Got it, okay.
It's in the
Update.
fall.
Continue anyway. That's it. I can now use Windows Hello if I want to. Do I want to?
You can,
I can.
or you can just do the pen.
You can all view my face even closer if you want now. Okay.
So we're using Windows Hello for Business. Now, using Windows Hello for Business to log into this machine, being an Azure Active Directory joined machine only, he can still get single sign-on to our on-prem resources, such as our file servers, legacy web applications, etc., because he is the same identity that has been synced from our on-prem AD.
Okay, MFA just kicked in, asking me for a code.
So we are using MFA here, so I told you that policy that we have into effect is going to force him to use MFA. So he'll be setting up his Hello credential here. The advantage of the Windows Hello for Business credential is that his credential is tied to the TPM in that machine. It cannot be used or replayed from another device. So we get a security uplift from that and stop the pass the hash or attacks like that. So he'll create a PIN. He won't expand it, but the PIN requirements that were brought down to that is actually the policy that I set up in Intune for what my PIN policy is. So that policy has already been applied to him as well.
All set.
And now he's in. So we didn't time that. I think that was somewhere close to 3 minutes. But we have a device that's now been provisioned via AutoPilot. Our user's in.
You can log off and log in, see if Windows Hello works, right?
You can. His custom start menu just took effect. I don't know if you guys caught that.
sees me already. No.
And so that brings us to questions. Does anybody have any questions?
Are there any questions?
You guys are awfully quiet.
Yes, there is one. Yes, sir.
So for applications that you need to deploy that require admin access, with this user set up as a non-admin, which you can do with AutoPilot, right? What's the story with that?
So if the application actually requires the user to have administrative access, we don't have any way to elevate just a single application, so they would have to be an administrator on that machine. Yeah. So if you have to provision a user that's an administrator on their machine, that's where we really want to look at the protection policies that we have to be able to secure the data and the identity on that machine. So if we can protect our corporate data from leaking out, so something like a Windows information protection policy where we know that the data is corporately owned by a corporate identity, and then not allowing that data to be copied and pasted into Twitter, Facebook, et cetera, that takes some of the risk out of having them install those applications. Doing things like AppGuard for websites I don't understand, putting the AppGuard session or the browser session into a virtualized container in a sandbox also helps. So depending on the use case and the things that you have, that's where we'd really look at using those policies to protect the identities and the data and mitigating the risk of them being an admin on that machine. Yes, sir.
Is Software Center available on a co-managed device?
Software Center is available on a co-managed device, and it's probably still coming down on this device at the moment. In a couple of seconds, you'll see it pop up in the recently added list at the top. So Software Center is an interesting question. So one of the things that I do get asked on the modernization side quite a bit is that gives your users a couple places to go for things, right? So you'll need to manage that experience of those applications don't show up in your private store, you get those from Software Center. So typically we use that for more of the assigned stuff and the legacy applications we want to push onto the device rather than the self-service mechanism. Anything else?
Takeaways.
So fully provisioned in a few minutes. He had his custom background, his custom start menu, his taskbar pins, fully ready to go on that device. Office is on there, and we're ready to rock. So that was a pretty quick provision. It's a great user experience. All right.
Yeah.
So takeaways?
Yeah, so we've shown and we actually confirmed the Surface is built for modern deployment and management. Only cloud-based management required. There's no user intervention required. We shorten and simplify the processes for that. Best experience for users in IT is a Microsoft 365 powered Surface. Again, all the drivers are already in it, and Windows Update has the updates for drivers and firmware for Surface as well in it, so there's no additional software you need to download from anywhere else. Cloud-powered provisioning and management and co-management, so you can have traditional management and modern management both on the same device to allow you to gradually move your users from the on-prem environment to the cloud. You manage the devices from purchase through retirement, so it's always the same place where you go throughout the life cycle to onboard them and then to retire them at the end. And the SCMM, Enterprise Management of Devices and Firmware.
So SEM is the ability for the administrators to manage the BIOS settings and things like that on a Surface at the enterprise level. So there's tooling to be able to do that. And today that would be a co-managed device.
There's another question.
Another question?
We have hundreds of Surface books enrolled into the Intune via Intune clients. So how would we import the existing hardwares with the Surface books?
So on an existing machine, the way that you would import those is you run the PowerShell script on those devices to actually harvest that information that I showed. So that's the ugly hash file that I showed you guys. You can put that script into SCCM and harvest it that way. On existing devices, you're probably not going to do it manually, but somehow you've got to get that run off the device and get the information back. That comes back to you in a CSV file format, so you can put a bunch of those in one file, and then you upload that. What it does for you on an existing device is that when I have a user out in the field and something goes wrong with that device, or I want to retask that device for a different purpose, hand it to someone else, et cetera, then at that point I'm able to bring it back to life via AutoPilot. So that typical process of I need to get the machine back, I need to wipe it, reload it, provision it again, and hand it back to the user becomes I just need to send it a reset command and tell them to log back in.
Cool.
So as we're ending in our last 30 seconds, you want to flip back over to that one?
Yes, of course.
No guarantees this works immediately, but what's the name of that one?
You want to wipe it?
Yeah.
Okay, so let's show you yours.
So we'll end the
Screen.
demo appropriately. We built a machine and now we're going to make it go bye-bye. API.
Got it? Okay, let me switch there.
So I'm actually going to initiate a wipe command on that machine, and if all goes well in the next 30 seconds or so, you're going to see it wipe itself or start the wipe process.
There, nope.
It's flickering. That's usually a good sign. See if the demo goes.
There it is.
That's how fast I can get rid of one from
Device
IT
is gone.
administrator.
Okay, so for the reason we're all here for. Give you the honors.
Do the big one first, or?
It's up to you.
All right, we're going to do the little one first. So you guys got tickets on the way in. Last four numbers on this are 9922. 9922. Going once? Going twice? All right, maybe you'll have better luck than I do.
Let's see. What are we given there?
Surface Power Pack. Or battery
Okay.
pack.
Perfect. So for a prestigious Surface Power Pack, end with 0009. There you go.
All right.
This is for another prestigious Surface Power Pack. 0252. Bingo. Very good. Yeah.
There you are, sir.
Okay. For another prestigious Surface Power Pack. 9919. Okay. Luck's out.
Going once? Twice.
Last chance for a prestigious Surface Power Pack, 0011. There you go.
There we go.
Okay, and now for a Surface Book, is it? Mm-hmm. Surface Book 2, 9917.
Going one.
Oh, that person's really bummed.
Going twice. Want to read it one more time?
Yeah, let's do it.
Okay.
Someone's going to really hate me today. 9959. There you go.
All right.
Okay, make sure before you leave you check out our other Surface sessions. They're all awesome and amazing, and please evaluate our session at the end. Thank you very much and have a lovely day.